Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Bears and Blooms, Stories from Our Spring China Adventure, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Brad Josephs. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Take it away, Brad.
Okay, thank you guys. Really excited to see all these folks. I guess there's something like 300 signed up watching me right now, and because the reason I'm doing this is I'm very dedicated to getting travel back going again in China. It's been a big struggle with COVID closure until we were started running trips in October 23. Yeah, so last October and and it's still we're getting the bookings are slow. And so what I want to show you is that we had travelers brave enough to do this trip, and they absolutely loved it. Everybody was safe, happy, and it's the best time to do this trip actually. Is to jump on it if you're curious about basically going on the most amazing trip to China, in my opinion, in the world. Really, it's awesome. So I think that this area, the region of China that we visit, is one of the world's best kept secrets, and I'll explain that. And the guys that came on our trips in October and then this spring are super happy. The reason I want to make this happen is because Natural Habitat, we've built an amazing team of a local team there, and they're basically they have to just wait for the Americans to start showing up again, so that they can keep doing what they love to do, which is show off their beautiful birds and scenery and pandas and other wildlife. So I'm just very dedicated. I love that place. I love our people, the people there that we work with, and I love showing Americans this gorgeous side of China that is very different from the stereotype that Americans generally get of China by watching sort of media and things like that. So this is the other side of China, the beautiful side. So here we go. I'm coming to you from my home in the Ozarks of Arkansas. I just got home from my China trip about 6 days ago, I think. So I'm still jet lagged, and I just finished editing the pictures that I'm going to show you last night and this morning. So I mean, but basically, I just was so excited to show you guys how awesome our trips are going, and so I'm very driven to do this. But anyway, so that's the view. The reason I'm showing that is a lot of people say, "Why does Brad live in Arkansas?" Well, that's why. I live in the middle of nowhere, in a beautiful place. In springtime, these pictures are from today. Is absolutely phenomenal. You know why I love it so much is because China actually reminds me, or this property that I live on in this area in the springtime especially reminds me of where we go in China. It's gorgeous spring. Okay, so I'm going to get and just tell you how the trip went. Well, we started our trip off in Xi'an, which is a major city of extreme historical significance. So it's a good place to start, where people can kind of get used to China, and there's a nice hotel and there's an airport, and we get to see some of the culture side before we get off into the hinterlands. So it's a vibrant city. I think my favorite thing about Xi'an for sure is going out at night in the Muslim quarter. So behind you there is the bell tower. So this is an ancient city. So a couple thousand years of history. It's surrounded by an old city wall that we see. And the bell tower and the drum tower basically would communicate to people outside of the wall in old times. Okay, we're closing the gates, get back inside. Because China at that time was a sort of a feudalistic, chaotic place. It was really dangerous. Lots of bandits and things like that. Anyway, so the other amazing thing about this spot is that it was the beginning of the Silk Road. So along my trip, what I do is I concentrate. Chinese history is huge, and so you can't just tell it all, or you would be talking too much for the people. So you just got to pick a few things that. Then what I like to highlight is the history of the Silk Road, and it begins in Xi'an, and that's the road that goes all the way to Europe, and so it's lots of super fascinating things that really changed humanity. Like, the Chinese, basically they invented gunpowder, paper, silk, these things, and then they moved them to Europe. That changed humanity. And then in Europe, they moved back, things over to China, such as like horses, and then some luxury coral items and things like that. So I mean, it started civilization, the Silk Road. So to see where it began is pretty exciting. So it's like going out at night in a town like that. I mean, yeah, it's just a cultural immersion. It's sort of a shock to the senses to the Americans, and then they get to see, okay, yeah, this is the crowded China that we thought, and wow, I'm experiencing the real, what it's like in a lot of places. But the people are beautiful. I mean, look at her. And a lot of them love. This is something that started after the pandemic. Actually, is a lot of these young people like to dress up in traditional Ming Dynasty clothing and outfits, and they love for you to go up and photograph them. Which, I mean, for a photographer, you can get some really pretty stunning stuff. This is just Most of these are just with my phone. But of course, as being in Xi'an, the major draw is the terracotta warriors. By the Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, he was very concerned about his afterlife. And so he decided to build this massive army, or have his people build this massive army to protect him in the afterlife. So they're all uniquely constructed. Everyone's different, warriors. So the terracotta warriors from 2,200 years ago, they were underground, and they were discovered by a farmer who was digging a well. So it's one of the most incredible historical, archaeological things you can see on Earth. So for sure, we hit Xi'an, we hit the Terracotta Warriors. It's a good place for us to eat some nice food. So one of the first questions that we get about China is, what's the food like? Well, let me tell you this. So if you don't think that you would like to go to Panda Express, or what's that other Chinese restaurant, that the chain, and you want to eat that every day for a couple weeks, and that doesn't sound good to you, don't let that keep you from going on this trip. You will actually, this trip is a foodie trip, and there's a reason why. Because other travel companies, they basically we go off the map, we go off the grid. But the other companies, traditional way of to tour China as a foreigner is you will go to restaurants that are set up for foreigners. It's not, and basically it's the food quality is not good. We abandoned that years ago, and we go to the local places and we eat like the locals do. And it is unbelievable as a food experience, this trip. You will get to try a dozen dishes at every meal, and every meal you'll have different of those dishes. So you're going to try so much food. In China, food is an art. So much so that an American can't really even fathom how much of it is a part of the culture, and an ancient part of their culture. And one of the reasons is China has struggled a lot in the past. And so they've had famines. And so what do you do in a famine? You learn how to make low quality food taste really good. And you learn how to use everything. Now, we only eat appropriate things. We don't eat everything that they eat, because they eat every part of the animal, basically. But you guys are going to have an incredible food experience. So that was in Xi'an. This one is in a rural area, a tiny village where there's a subculture of Muslim left over from the Silk Road, and we get to eat this extremely rare traditional one Muslim hot pot. And we had about 25 different kinds of delicious edible mushrooms. And I think that there's, like, I don't know, maybe 10 different edible mushrooms in the United States, I think, that is available. Okay, so Xi'an is great. We get our culture and our history in. Everybody kind of gets settled in with their time zone, and learns how to use chopsticks, and learns about Chinese food and everything else before we get into the rural area. And China changes very quickly. It's one of the things I think that I like to share with Americans, just for their own good, as far as their education of how the world works. is how fast China is at mobilizing and constructing things, and their infrastructure is getting so incredible so fast. And so we get on one of these new started in 2019 a bullet train, and we don't have bullet trains in the United States. I wish we did. They're absolutely amazing. They go like 150 to 250 miles an hour. It's super smooth. They leave on time within the second. They're never late, and it's just an incredible way. It's like so futuristic. So we futuristically shoot our way from Xi'an down into Sichuan province, which is that's the part of China that I really love. But it's really fun on this bullet train. I mean, you just look outside and watch the scenery. But the amazing thing about it is that you go underneath an entire mountain range. They've built tunnels, up to 10 miles long, and then lots of them. So instead of having, the windy road that you used to have to go across this mountain range that took 20 hours in a bus, now it's 40 minutes just under the mountain range. It's pretty impressive. And then we shoot out the other side, and then we get into a bus that we travel with the rest of the trip, and then we drive into the Minshan Mountains. So as soon as you leave that futuristic bullet train and you get on the bus and you get into the countryside, it's like you've just gone from it's like you were 100 years in the future, and then all of a sudden you've gone back 200 years as soon as you get. And so our first stop is this gorgeous ancient village where you got this ancient city wall that's built about 2,000 years ago. Um, this is an important Silk Road, ancient Silk Road trade route, because a lot of the silk originated in Sichuan, and then a small route brought that silk to Xi'an, the official start of the Silk Road, which then it branched off into the rest of the world from the Silk Road. Anyway, I can get off on too many tangents. You'll see, I just love this place. So years ago, I met this girl, and she's become a good friend of ours now. She owns a tea shop, so we go stop by and see her tea shop, and she, yeah. So the tea that we buy there is some of the best quality green tea in the world, and we get it for almost nothing. I mean, it's just nothing. So that's what I do. I fill my suitcases up with green tea, and those are all my Christmas presents and stuff. Local honey, things like that. Anyway, she's about the only gal who speaks English in the village, and so she loves to give us a tour around. And then so she's become a friend. So it's really amazing to start running these trips again and get to see these local contacts and friends that we've built a great relationship with over the years. And this is a beautiful little village we walk through, but it's at the gateway to a nature reserve, which I will have to say that if I had to vote, it's my favorite place in the world because of the biodiversity, the scenery, the lack of people. It's just an absolute gem for a naturalist and someone that loves nature. And I don't even tell people what it's called. You might figure it out, but it's pretty still a big secret. So anyway, so in the spring trips, one of the highlights is to go to this place and hit the redbud blooms. So these are native wild redbuds that are just fantastic. This is called Redbud Valley. So we enjoy the redbuds and the beautiful rivers, and so we walk boardwalks. We walk easy trails. And when we pulled in this trip, within 5 minutes of getting out, I had heard a rumor that there was a mother moon bear, which is an Asiatic black bear, which is extremely rare, one of the most difficult animals to see in the wild on Earth. And I kind of, my ranger friend told me kind of where it was. So we're pulling off. I see one photographer photographing something on the slope. I get out and I asked him, Yo meo heshong, which means, do you have a moon bear? He says, Yo, which means I have one. So to be able to go back and say, guys, let's get off because we have a moon bear, a wild moon bear, something that wildlife lovers never, even in their fantasies, they would never think they'd ever see one in the wild. And so it was a mom and a cub. I was mostly dealing with the scope and things like that. So my pictures are not that great, but that's the cub, and then that's the mother. And so we got to watch them for a long time. And that's one of our travelers on this trip, Frank and Urban, and he that's a picture that he got with his sort of bridge camera. Got a great shot, and you can see the beautiful redbud tree in the back. So that's how we started out our trip in this nature reserve. So it was off to a really good start. These are pictures from the past that we've gotten of wild moon bears, and I think we're up to like something like a dozen sightings on our trips of wild moon bears. Not something that you can expect to see, but just knowing that you have a chance to see it, and if you do see it, you're super lucky. It's amazing. So it may just look like our black bear at home, but it's a moon bear, Asiatic black bear, and it's a name for this, which it doesn't show it in any of these pictures, but this moon shaped crescent on their chest. One cool thing about moon bears that usually really surprises people is they actually build nests in trees. So they'll go get up into a tree that has walnuts or chestnuts or some flower or leaf bud that they like. So they break the branches off while they're up in the tree, and then they eat what they need. But instead of just throwing it down, they actually build a nest so that they can have a comfortable place to sit while they pretty much destroy the tree that they're feeding on. And then when they're done, there's no more food left, and they go to another one. But anyway, so that is a moon bear, a very nice example of a moon bear nest. And so lots of interesting things. This is another just kind of screen of different exotic wildlife that lives in the place that we've seen over the years: a hog badger, yellow-throated martin, leopard cat, civet. So just so you know that even though to me it reminds me a lot of the hills of the Ozarks where I live, or maybe the Appalachians, kind of where I partly grew up in North Carolina. But it's, I mean, it's the same beautiful stuff that I'll show you, like the rhododendrons and the beautiful rivers and creeks and things like that. But then the wildlife is very exotic, such as every once in a while. We didn't see it this year, and I'm really surprised. But almost every other trip, we do see wild golden pheasants, which are just stunning. This is the male. Something like a red-billed blue magpie, one of the 3 species of magpies that lives in China, but exceptional that I love them so much is look at their beautiful red bill. The other magpies that we have and all the other ones, they don't have this gorgeous red bill, and they have a really long tail. So just a small sample, such as this a Reeves muntjac that got this shot this trip. And one really amazing thing I'm so glad I captured for the first time is you'll notice on his upper jaw, they have a canine tooth. So a lot of these small deer species in Asia, there's several different species, they actually have almost like vampire teeth. The males will use them for fighting over females. But anyway, so I was finally able to capture this. This would be what the skull of this animal would look like as a deer. So again, just all these crazy things that are like, wow, a deer with fangs. Okay. Uh, this is the tufted deer, another small deer. These are some of the wildlife that we see. Now then we get into some of the stuff that really gets people excited, such as the Szechuan takin. So hybrid kind of species. We have 2 subspecies, the Szechuan takin and the golden takin, live in this region. So you notice the beautiful golden color of this the bovid subfamily Capernae, which is the goat antelope. So it's actually related to our mountain sheep and our mountain goats. But it does climb on cliffs and incredibly agile like a mountain goat would be. But they're about at least 800 pounds, and they're absolutely so muscular. So these are fantastic animals that we get to see. The takin have become not afraid of people in this special reserve, and the numbers are quite high. So we get really good takin viewing. And if you're a mammal person like me that grew up looking at mammal books and dreaming about seeing rare animals in the wild, this one is way up there because I never thought I would ever see a wild takin in the wild because they were hunted almost to extinction. But now they're making a comeback, and there's a very well conserved. I will have to say that one of the things I like to do in this trip is break down the stereotypes that we have about China. So everywhere in the world has stereotypes about America, and we as Americans might say, well, don't stereotype us. Well, China's the same way. So everybody kind of thinks that China just basically kills all the animals. And that's actually not true. I mean, yes, they have those issues. I've got entire webinars based on conservation in China and things like that. But I will say, just to long story short, the Chinese, they definitely obey the law. And the native wildlife in China is probably, I'm going to have to say, and I very confidently say, is actually the most highly well protected wildlife on Earth. So if you're an endangered species in China, you're actually set. There are consumers who still follow traditional Chinese medicine, but that's actually dying off, um, who illegally purchase endangered species from other places. That is something that is dying off pretty rapidly with the new generation. So that old stereotype should go away. It's still an issue in some things, but it's being worked on and it's getting a lot better. But if you go to a nature reserve in China and you see an endangered species, there's about a zero chance that that animal is going to get poached. Anyway, so you can see that, and the way that you can actually tell that animals are well protected is because they lose their fear of people. And so this is an animal that 10 years ago would have disappeared as soon as it heard a human voice from 2 miles away. Now I have to be careful because sometimes our people, they get too close to the people and they can be dangerous animals. So this is an exciting encounter that we had. Here's another amazing highlight from this trip. We saw a tawny fish owl. So basically this is very, very endangered and rare. And so we got to see I think it was a mother and a juvenile. This is an owl that basically operates like an osprey. I mean, it hunts fish in the rivers. And so if you're a bird person, for rare birds, you're going to see this and get super excited about the chance of seeing a tawny fish owl. So we've got, even though it's in the mountains, we've got these we call the old man in the mountain, the Tibetan macaque. This fuzzy macaque, super. They're not afraid of people. We always find troops of them. We get great photo ops for these guys. So it's just really cool to be up in a beautiful deciduous mountain forest and have this exotic group of primates that you can photograph that, again, like most of the things I'm talking about, nobody's ever even heard of them. And that's the magic of China. You can go to Africa and, see giraffes and zebras and all that, and it's amazing. But there's something actually extra special about seeing stuff that you and none of your friends that I've ever even heard of these species, but we're seeing them. So, and we do get into wild giant panda habitat. We keep this reserve name a secret, but we call it the Giant Panda Nature Reserve. And but you cannot expect to do what I guide in Katmai or used to guide in polar bears in Churchill, where you just pull a vehicle up and there's bears around, or walk up to these bears and sit down and watch them. And the pandas are extremely rare. We basically never see them in the wild. But the magic is that we do get in their habitat. We see all the other animals that live there. We learn about the habitat, and we have that small chance of seeing it because we've gotten into one of the most pristine wilderness in areas of Asia. So an animal that definitely, I will have to say, is the hardest animal in the world to see in the wild. I've been working in China doing these trips and scouting and traveling since 2008. I've tried really hard to see wild pandas. And then I kind of I sort of did. I basically saw him disappear into the bamboo once, and I saw the tracks in the snow, but I didn't really get a great look at it. So, but that's how hard it is. But we find poop. And so this trip, we hiked up into an area where about 7 days previous, a giant wild panda had been spotted. So we were able to set our scopes up and spend a couple of hours searching, knowing in one of these trees that panda's there. So even if you don't see the animal, the thrill of being there and actually going to try and showing your enthusiasm to the locals of how you want to give thanks to the people that preserve this place, and that's actually the special thrill. So like I mentioned, it's kind of similar to the Appalachians. I grew up in the Appalachians were part of my childhood and stuff. And so I love rhododendrons. There are 571 species of rhododendrons in China. 409 are endemic, only found in this area, in these certain regions, such as the hot spot really are the Minshan Mountains. So if you like rhododendrons, the most common question I get is, Brad, when's the best time to go? And I say, well, we picked 2 windows to go, and they're both equally as amazing. It's your choice. You have to, what do you like better? Do you like fall colors or do you like spring flowers? They're both phenomenal. So we go in the spring and the fall for those reasons. And if you're a super flower botanist kind of person, yeah, I would pick the spring trips. You get lots of azaleas and rhododendrons, and the redbuds are blooming, and depending on what elevation you're at the time. So it's fantastic. If you're a fall color person, definitely go in the fall. One of my favorite trees in the world is the ginkgo. They're basically like a living fossil. They're indestructible. They've been brought over to different parts of the world because you can grow them in cities and nothing kills them, like no pollution or anything. I mean, once they grow slow, but once they basically, the only organism to survive the Hiroshima blast was the ginkgo tree. So they're a respected tree. And one of the reasons they're so respected is they're gorgeous in the fall. Well, China is loaded with ginkgos. Actually, this region of these mountains is where ginkgos natively originated. In fact, we see a ginkgo that they estimate at 2,000 years old. I couldn't find a picture to show you, but it's this monster ginkgo with like probably like a 12-foot circumference trunk. To see that guy, it actually, this picture is from that tree. I just didn't get the rest of it. But yeah, so you're going to see, and then all kinds of different sorts of maples and other deciduous trees that turn beautiful colors. So I'm showing this webinar as like, this was a spring trip that went great. But if anybody's booked for the fall or thinking of booking in the fall and they like fall colors, go for it, because they're both an equally amazing trip. And as far as the wildlife you see, it's equal. We saw a great moon bear on this trip. We did not see one in October, but most of the sightings are in October for some reason, because they get up into these walnut and chestnut trees and they're a little easier to find. So every time we go to these places, I'm gonna try to show you at the end like a little hint of where we stay, so you don't think that Brad's drug you up into some bamboo hut with no running water. I mean, I would do that if you want to. I love that kind of stuff, but it's a NatHab trip, so everywhere we go, we have nice accommodations, and the accommodations have gotten so much better. So let's just say maybe you did this trip with me 10 years ago, and you'd like to maybe go again, and you remember that the hotels that we would stay at were constant issues. That's not actually the case anymore. Things have really progressed, and we stay in some really nice places. This is a little lodge right in the heart of this nature reserve. We've got great relationships, and what we do is, as NatHab travelers, is we go show what NatHab is all about. It's about conservation nature travel. So we're respectful, and we come up and we appreciate the wildlife, and we have taught this reserve and the other reserves we visit a lot about how to manage a nature reserve with tourism. It's going to bring in money, and then you can have naturalist guides and rangers and all these kind of things. It actually works out really, really well. So the next place we go is the Golden Monkey Reserve. Again, I'm not going to name the name of it because we're basically the only ones that go there, and I'd like to keep it that way. Because I know that when our groups go there with our guides, there's 3 guides now. It's myself, who are equally as great, and Eddie Savage and Sam Wilson. We're going to make sure that everything's done correctly. And so as the reserve staff understands how to manage foreign tourists, which we're right now the only ones, we'll just kind of give it some time. But this is a picture from the trip that just ended. I did not guide it. My very good friend, colleague, Eddie Savage guided it. He took this picture and gave it to me, just to give you a little bit of a hint of seeing an animal, again, like the takin and some of those other animals that I was talking about. Such a unique, beautiful, but extremely rare. Only 15,000 of these exist in the wild. So what the government has done is a couple places. They basically have finally figured out that golden monkey's highest mortality rate comes from overwinter survival. The reason is because they eat lichens that grow in trees, dead trees mostly. Well, even if they protect a forest, generally they used to allow people to go in and at least cut the dead trees down because they needed firewood. Well, that took away these lichen trees, and so the numbers kept falling. So they tried to boost them up by giving them some supplemental feeding programs. So with that, two things happened. They became habituated to people that slowly, finally, weren't afraid of people. So they could share the same habitat with people, and primatologists could go up and finally figure out all the mysteries of this extremely secretive, very, very endangered, and fantastic monkey. So we are able to actually go visit some of these spots. And all I can say is it is it for sure 95% of the time now that we've started doing these, it's the highlight of the trip for everybody, almost everybody. It's a highlight, and for me for sure. It's my favorite primate in the world. They're fantastic. If you've seen the show Born in China, you'll fall in love with these creatures, but you'll know I'll never see those in the wild. Well, here you can. So phenotypically, they're absolutely fantastically beautiful and unique and exotic. And then their behaviors, they're actually a really gentle, friendly monkey because they live in big troops that are basically like small sub harems. So you have like one male with 3 wives and the kids, and then there'll be like those little family groups all together. So they're really, really social, and those family groups constantly hug each other, and they interact so well. And so anyway, so this is one of the small ones, the juvenile. They're with the blue face, and then you notice all that fur. So they live at a colder average climate temperature than any other primate other than humans. So they live up to between 8 and 12,000 feet. So I think we're around 8,000 here at this place. And I don't know, it's just fantastic. And the winner of the recently several years ago, maybe in 2018, there was the BBC Wildlife Photographer of the Year award was at a place like this of these monkeys, because people are like, wow, look at that thing. No, never heard of it, never seen a picture of it. You get a gorgeous shot of something so rare. But anyway, we do it, and we do it very well, and everybody loves it. This is the keeper of that spot, and he truly loves those monkeys, and he's staring up at them right now, and you can just tell we're the only foreign group that goes to this spot. Almost the only, even mainland Chinese tourists, nobody goes there. So we show up with our group, and we're all very friendly and respectful and nice, and he can tell how much he loves the monkeys. Mostly, almost all the time, he spends up there by himself. So it's really cool for us to be there with him sharing these monkeys with us. And so we obviously get a pretty up close view. It's magical. I mean, I can't. And so those were from this last trip, and but this one is a picture from the fall, just so you can see kind of getting a picture of a monkey with the fall colors in the back, which is great. Okay, so where do we spend the night that night? Even though we're in the absolute middle of nowhere, we have to drive up about a 2-hour road. That's exciting to get up to this reserve. But then at night, here's where we stay. This used to be the one town that did not have a very acceptable hotel, but now it does. It's beautiful, and the beds are soft, and the bathroom's great, and everything's good. So there really isn't any times other than, well, that we don't stay in nice places, and we always eat great food. Okay, so the next day we drive over to the other end of the basin to Dujian, where we visit our first panda base. So these are not zoos. These are panda research and breeding centers, because pandas almost went extinct in the 1980s. Almost went extinct, even in captivity. Now there's still only on about 700 in captivity in the world. So they're very hard to breed in the wild. They're very, very valuable. This is where the pandas were saved from extinction. So yes, they're not. It's not in the wild, but that's an impossibility. You can't. There's no. You cannot go on a panda viewing trip and go out into the wild and see them. You can try, but trust me, it's just not feasible. Um, And I've tried, and I don't think any of you guys would want to try because it's very difficult camping in those mountains for weeks on end and stuff. Anyway, but everybody loves pandas. So what we do, our first panda base, we go behind the scenes and we do a panda volunteer program where basically we go into the enclosures and we clean up. It's very important. I mean, the pandas are managed so we have to go collect everything that they have not eaten and also collect their poop so that they can say, well, we fed them X amount, they didn't eat X amount or Y amount, and then they excreted C amount. So they use different sort of math formulas to figure out, how much is that panda taking in, so they get it all perfect. So yeah, so we just have a good time getting into a panda enclosure while the panda's actually in its house. It's not in there with us, and we have a great time. And we get to view pandas that day, which is beautiful. So if you love pandas, okay, I'll just one little story. When I was in the 1980s, I really loved pandas when I was a kid. Um, so and it's I remember I had a big poster of World Wildlife Fund when I was like 8 years old, and so I just loved. I just born loving this stuff. So my dad took me to Washington D.C. to show me the White House and the monuments and all that stuff, teach me those kind of things. I didn't really care about that stuff, but I really wanted to go to the Washington National Zoo to see the panda. Well, we went there. We spent like 6 hours, I think, waiting for a panda that was sleeping behind a bush to wake up. There was about 1 million people there. So that's kind of it's very difficult to really have great panda viewing in even in captivity. So here it is an absolute explosion of watching pandas. I mean, there's pandas and pandas and pandas and pandas. Babies, males, females, mom and babies, the whole deal. And then, so that town again at night, we go out and we see cool stuff like China at night, the towns at night. This is like ancient town, so beautifully lit up at night. So we just have a good time the whole time. So this is in Dujian. This is an irrigation system. Get this: the irrigation system was built 2,200 years ago, around 2,000 years ago. It's the first irrigation in the world. They learned how 2,000 years ago to tunnel under a mountain in order by basically heating the rock up and then putting cold water on it so it fractures and basically dig it. This is before dynamite or heavy machinery or drills or anything. Well, 2,000 years ago, they basically built an irrigation way under a mountain so that they could control the water flow. They could basically put more water in during a drought and then during the flood season hold it back. And it allowed the Sichuan Basin, which is where we're at there, to become this what they call is the kingdom of heaven because of the amazing agriculture. You've got all this water, it's kind of like a subtropical greenhouse. It's like humid. It's just it's like a basically a greenhouse basin. So anyway, it all started with the Dujian. And then the next day we go up into the high country to go to the very famous Wolong Panda Base, which is up in the mountains in panda habitat. And that is the original panda base where they did save pandas from being extinct. So if you want to go on this trip and learn more about it, there's several books you can read, such as The Last Panda by George Schaller, to really understand it would be hard for me to do a webinar on the panda conservation history story and fit it in an hour. But if you did that research and you do understand what Wolong is and appreciate it, it's like, wow, here we are. So we go to Wolong, and that is the best place for us to see the panda cubs, the little babies. And it's not crowded. I mean, you again, you just got pandas, pandas, pandas. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to tell you something. So this is Kevin. Oh, I'm sorry, Wong and Karen, who are two of our local assistant guides. They of all the places that I've worked for NatHab, they are by far this team of people that we have are the best um, sort of local partners that I've ever worked with. They take such great care of us. You will fall absolutely in love with these guys. I mean, their attention to detail And they're so friendly and kind, and they're just magical people to work with. Basically, is all I can say. And then here's my sort of national guide. So she and I guide together. Um, my Chinese is very limited. I can speak some, but I mean I can't communicate and do a trip. So Bella and I work together. She is fantastic. Her English is amazing. It's gotten so much better, and she just is an expert on everything. And she's basically one of the most well-known bird guides in China. So she knows every bird by song and sight. So she's a fantastic. If you go on this trip, you will fall in love with Bella and Wang and Karen, or Philip if you guide with him. He's a good friend of mine that kind of we helped start this whole trip itinerary and style of travel. So yeah, here's Bella and one of the guys on my trip from this last week, and we're just enjoying just watching pandas. If you love pandas, this is your trip. There's Frank and Nancy Urban again. And then Simone, she had a blast. She said this trip was a life-changing experience for her. She cried at the golden monkeys and then just absolutely loved the pandas. And yeah, so we see lots of baby pandas, panda cubs. Great panda photos. Stuff you can't get anywhere else in the world. Okay, so that was in the spring. So this would be in the fall. Great picture of a panda cub sleeping in his tree, which they always sleep in after they eat, with a beautiful fall colors in the back. So then from there, it's a complicated itinerary, but just anyway. So then from there, we drive further up into the mountains. We crest a pass at 12,000 feet, and on the other side of that pass, now we're up in the Tibetan region. So these are kind of the extension of the Himalayas in China. Some of the most amazing mountains in the world, and we get to see Four Sisters Mountain, which is 20,000 feet. So it's like basically taller than Denali. And so, yes, we are at a little bit of high altitude. We crest at 12, and then we drive down and sleep at 10,000 feet. So, but we get to see some most amazing. So here's kind of cool. I found this app from my buddy who's been on a lot of trips with me, Ron Brown. Hey, Ron, he's probably watching. And he said, "Oh, look at this app I found on my phone. It's called Peak Finder." So basically, you just point it at mountains, and it tells you their name and elevation. So I did that here. Shows me exactly where I am. I'm at 11,300 feet, and then you've got that 20,000 foot, 506 foot mountain, and then the other of the Three Sisters. So the reason we're up in there is because there's a Four Sisters Mountain National Park, which is truly some of the most spectacular scenery I've ever seen in my life. Yep, I lived in Alaska for 20 years. I've been all over the world. This place is gorgeous. And it's surreally gorgeous. So this is in the spring, which is good because we've got lots of snow, much more snow. In fact, it snowed the night before we went, so we got to see that. There I am chilling out, some strange thing that they built in the middle of nowhere. But we just take these, we're up at high altitude there, about 12,000 feet, but we're just walking on flat boardwalks, just soaking in the scenery. It's just fantastic. And it's a series of lakes that were called quake lakes. Basically, you got a stream running through a valley, and then this is a very seismically active region of the world. So we had a lot of earthquakes in the past. So these earthquakes, hundreds of years ago, basically dammed up these creeks and created these lakes. And you got mulberry trees in the fall. That tree right there that you see in the middle is full of these beautiful sea buckthorn berries. Sea buckthorn. So bright orange berries. The fall colors there are fantastic. So you can see the old trees that were there before that earthquake created that lake. And because it's such a dry, cold climate, they basically are like going to stay there forever, not rot. So just a sampling of just us having fun up in the mountains. Not really the China that most people think of. Going to China. So I got really lucky this year with some gorgeous birds. This one is a super high on the hot list for birders if they go to China or the Tibetan area. These are called the grendalas, and they're gorgeous. We saw like 200 of them. They were hard to photograph, but yeah. So there's this beautiful indigo blue with the black wings. We got to see the lammergeier, one of the most amazing birds. It's got a 10-foot wingspan. And it's also called the bearded vulture because it's got this sort of a beard kind of thing hanging off its beak. And so this bird is called an ossifrage. If you guys could answer me, I'd love to be like, who knows what an ossifrage is? Probably very few of you would know. So it's a bone eater. And there's not very many bone eaters in the world. It basically can survive on pure bone. So after the other massive vultures of the Himalayas eat something that's been killed, like by a snow leopard or Tibetan wolves or brown bear, they eat the meat. The griffins eat the meat. And then after they're done, the lammergeier comes down and eats the bones. And that's all it really wants. And if it has a femur bone of a yak or something, it can't break it with its very strong jaws and just swallow it whole with its specialized stomach, which can break bone down. It'll fly way up in the air and drop it and then shatter it, and then it'll eat it like that. So, and then this is a red-fronted redstart, beautiful birds, a white-throated dipper. So if you like dippers, it's the only passerine or songbird that basically jumps in the water and runs along the bottom eating insects and also small fish. These are more grandalas. This is the females, and then the male is the blue one. More gorgeous scenery that I can't even believe. And then, so we had a fresh snowfall this year. Anyway, it's a fantastic day in some really exotic mountain country. So that was spring. I'd want to show you. I'm not talking everybody into just going on spring trips. This would be that place in the fall. So the mountains are studded with the tamarack or larch, which is a deciduous conifer that turns a gorgeous yellow in the fall. And so that's one of the most dominant trees there. So yes, larches in the fall are fantastic. We have them in the United States, but not to this number. And these are the kind of just walking on the boardwalk through this magic mountain forest with quake lakes and waterfalls. Okay, so where are we staying when we're up in this crazy place? It used to be a little bit tough accommodation wise, but now they've built this new beautiful lodge out by itself in the mountains in like Tibetan style village. And so it is it's not like 5-star Xi'an hotel, but it's really, really nice and comfortable. And there's some pictures of it with a huge picture window looking over the mountains. And then at night they have these awesome traditional Tibetan dance parties, which are very fun. So we got to drive back all the way down eventually that day to our final destination, which is the airport hotel on an airport outside of Chengdu, which makes our departures really easy. So we stay at a 5-star hotel. But on the way, we stop at another panda base where we can see more pandas and also red pandas. Speaking of red pandas, those are in the breeding center, breeding base, beautiful area, great place to see them. But on this last trip, Eddie Savage sent me this picture that as they were driving down through the mountains, they spotted this wild red panda, which is fantastic. Another super endangered, very difficult to see animal. But we've had several sightings on our trips, and we hope to have more. Just a little video. This is from the panda base. So yeah, I mean, super beautiful, super cute. Red pandas just 10 feet away from me. So some of the world's most charismatic animals just all over the place. And this place, I just wanted to show a couple more pictures of the gorgeous flowers in the spring. These beautiful, so many different species of rhododendrons. So the one bad thing about me being over there in China, having to see all those gorgeous animals and flowers and mountains and eat that amazing food and hang out with my favorite people to work with, was I missed the eclipse, and I live in Arkansas, so I was really bummed out. So bummed out, I got on AI and I said, make me a picture of an eclipse in China with pandas. And then I posted this and I said, oh yeah, that eclipse in Austin, Texas looks really cool. Everybody's showing off their eclipse pictures. I go, but we had a good eclipse yesterday here in China. Anyway, it's just a stupid joke. But anyway, if you want to see more of my stuff, so a lot of what I've done is that I do now, a lot of people is I'll shoot videos and then I'll put together reels with music and stuff like that. So if you want to see a lot more of this kind of stuff, including everywhere else I go, brown bears, tigers, snow leopards, all this kind of stuff, You can go to my Instagram page, and that's where I usually put that's where most of my best stuff up there. So if you want to see more, you can follow me. I'm at Brad Joseph's Photos. I'll come up on Instagram. Okay, that is the last slide. And wow, 2:53. So we have some time for questions. And I always
All
get
right.
scared. I always, oh, yep, you're still there. Good.
I am here, Brad. All right, thank you so much. Before we start the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that if you do have questions, please submit them via the question field in your control panel. All right, let's get to some questions. So, can you talk about the level of difficulty as far as walking goes? Are there going to be a lot of walks, and should I be prepared for that?
Okay, and that's always a hard question because it's all relative. But people on this trip need to be prepared to be able to walk. Now, they don't have to be bushwhacking. They don't have to be hiking up the mountain to see the gorillas like in Africa or something like that. It's not. You don't need to be. It's not like a snow leopard trip where we're exerting ourselves at super high altitude. But you have to be able to be agile enough to walk. There are so many stairs everywhere you go. Just, I mean, so if, as far as knees go, you need to be able to walk several miles a day on you almost always flat surfaces or stairs. Even to get to the wild panda habitat, it was really well. I will say that the hard hikes are always optional. Anytime I say, guys, we can go up to this wild panda habitat, it's going to be a 2,000 foot elevation gain, tons and tons of stairs, but never like a muddy trail, just stairs. But you need to be able to go up and down. Some people say no. I say, okay, no problem. We've got three guides, which is myself, Bella, or the national guide, and then an assistant. We often will split up. Okay, there's an easy walk down by the river, and then there's the hike up into the mountain. And so we try to split up as well as we can. But anywhere we go, like the panda bases and stuff like that, so there's going to be several thousand meters of walking, and a lot of it's going to be up and down stairs. So um, that's that. It's some of the walking is so okay. Let me rephrase this. The really hard hikes that we have the chance to do will always be optional, always optional. However, you still need to be able to navigate stairs and be able to walk like a mile on easy surface without a problem.
Great, thank you for addressing that. And let's talk about altitude for a minute here too. What altitudes are we going to be at, and is that going to be an issue for me?
We've had people that showed up that had a really tough time because they couldn't walk or weren't in shape, and they still enjoyed the trip. They still went up to the high altitude, and we've never had a problem. But yes, I mean, it is, we sleep at 10,000. Okay, at the very end of the trip, 2 nights only, we do go up into that mountain area. The rest of the trip is not high altitudes at all. It's goes from 1,000 feet to maybe 7,000 feet from almost the whole trip. And then at the very end, we go up to, we sleep at 10,000 2 nights. During the day, we can go up as high as 12. But the thing about acclimatizing is we just take it really easy when we're up there. We just walk along the flat boardwalks, mostly downhill down the valley. So we're not exerting ourselves very much. The other thing that really helps us is the fact that we will get out and take a picture, hang out a little bit at 12,000, but then sleep at 10. So when, for some reason, with the human body acclimatizing and dealing with altitude, if you go higher during the day than you sleep, it really helps. So we take measures. We monitor people, just make sure they're okay. Never had a problem. People might get a slight headache, alleviated with Advil. They need to stay well hydrated, and they need to avoid alcohol. They need to realize that they may not digest food as well as they can because your blood's perfusing to oxygenate your, so it's doing less work digesting. So you just eat a little less, and then you expect maybe you won't sleep quite as well, but it's really well worth it. If there ever was a problem, we've got lots of plan A, B's, and C's to get people quickly down to lower elevation. But again, we haven't had a problem yet.
So, besides the colors, can you talk about what the weather difference is between the spring and the fall, between temperatures and rainfall and things like that?
Pretty similar. I think that there's probably a little more rain usually in the fall. Um, Temperatures are about the same. And our temperatures that we deal with depends on what altitude we're at. So when we're down in the Sichuan Basin, like this last trip, it was like 78, 80 degrees. But then we get higher up into the mountains, depending on the elevation. It would be chilly at night. But the very end of the trip, we could encounter some snow. But then every time I've ever been there, when it snowed during the night only, always the sun comes out and it's gorgeous in the afternoon. So it's kind of trip where you just have to have lots of layers. But there's nothing extreme like say going to Churchill in the Northern Lights season and dealing with 70 below or anything like that. And it's also there's no heat extremes either. But spring and fall are generally the same. The climate is just kind of like um, the mountains in North Carolina or Arkansas. So it's in the fall and the spring, it's very, very pleasant.
Great. Thank you. So, what family does the takin belong to?
Cabernet is the family. I'm sorry, Bovidae is the family. So the bovid. So it's a bovid like cows and things like that. But it's in a subfamily called Cabernet, which is the common name for that subfamily. Cabernet is goat antelope,
Great. Thank you for that. What
related to
about
mountain, not related to cows. Well, I mean related, but they're in a separate category. Like mountain sheep, mountain goats, things like that. Okay.
great? Gotcha. What about reptiles? Are reptiles something we're going to see?
We used to run these trips in September. Strange story. The reason we ran them in September was because I was the only guide to do China, and I had to be in polar bear season because there was not very many polar bear guides back then. But then when there was more polar bear guides, I kept pushing like it's gonna be much better in the fall. Anyway, when I went in September, we would see lots of reptiles and amphibians. So frogs, toads, lots of different kinds of snakes. But now that we are doing our trips earlier in the spring, which is cooler, and then later in the fall, since then I haven't seen one at all. It's possible. There's some beautiful reptiles there, some gorgeous diversity, especially of snakes and some frogs. But we don't really see very many now because of the season we're at.
So, pandas are pretty interesting animals, but ju- just what does panda excrement look like, and do they poop a lot?
They do, because the thing about panda is it's got a stomach like ours or other bears. So we have to eat high quality food. So if you look at a takin, they've got a very, very complex stomach with a rumen, and they can digest vegetation to something like a 98% efficiency rate. And so they do eat bamboo. They love it. And they do real well because they can digest it at 98%. If we ate what a takin ate, we would starve to death because we don't have that complex stomach. Neither does a panda. So pandas have to eat something like 50 to 100 pounds of bamboo every day to make a living. So they don't digest it so efficiently. So they have to eat lots and lots and lots of it. So basically, what they do poop a lot, and it just it's like little footballs full of undigested bamboo shards, and they're somehow able to get enough protein and carbos as long as they eat tons of it. They basically spend their life 50% of their life eating and 50% of their life sleeping because they are so specialized in eating a food source that their stomach is not very efficient in actually digesting. It's kind of a strange trick that evolution played on them. They broke off on a really specialized niche that's really difficult to do, but I mean they were able to just kind of just barely get through it.
Great. Thank you for addressing that interesting question. Unfortunately, that will be the last one that we do have time for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for some closing comments.
Okay, guys, I think there's lots of levels of why I love this trip. Um, I think it's It's where NatHab sort of trusted me to like go out and figure my own thing out and make my own contacts, and they trusted me to do a trip that, this is years ago, but like that nobody really had ever done before. So for me, it's thrilling. It's also thrilling for me to, because I have fallen in love with China, and so it's really thrilling for me to help other people from the United States fall in love with China. The reason most people come on this trip is they want to see pandas, but they not necessarily had never been to China before. They're not going to be in love with China because stuff you see on the news and everything like that, and you got a certain skewed perception. But to actually get out there and then watch them fall in love with all aspects of China, the food, the people, the history of it, just the civilization, this wildlife, the scenery, the whole package is really, really is thrilling for me. So it was very, very traumatizing when COVID shut it all down, and COVID shut it down twice as long as it did, even say when I'm guiding in Borneo. So finally, when last October rolled around, basically, my guys my boss said, "Okay, well, looks like we can run the trip, but nobody wants to go." And I'm like, "Damn it!" And finally, we did get enough people to run the trip in October. We didn't see, and even on this trip, zero other foreigners. So nobody, I mean, so we just feel like pioneers, like brave pioneers. Of course, I mean, are we at risk? No, we're not. Is the government hate you because you're American? Absolutely not. I feel as welcomed as I do anywhere on the planet. And so all I can say is I just said to my group that I just finished with, or the groups in October, thank you for trusting us. And look what you got in reward, which is an incredible, awesome experience. So I'm glad that there's 300 people that are considering going to see this place. China and the United States definitely are two different places, and they don't always get along so well, and a bit scared of each other. And I think that we both, China and the United States, are fascinated with one another. And I think that the best way for us as countries to get along is for the most people to really understand it. And to truly understand China, you go there. And then you really see. Nothing you can find on the internet or on TV can really teach you what you really need to know about China to appreciate it. And when you appreciate another foe or whatever it is in a different country, if you appreciate it, you understand it, you're much, much more willing to get along with it. So I think it's an educational experience that I wish all Americans could do. I'd love to take everybody and just say, this is what the real China is. And so I think there's more levels to it than just, I want to check pandas off of my bucket list. There's a lot of other animals that you're going to check off your bucket list, like takin, golden monkeys, all these cool things, these mountains. But also, there's a different level to a bucket list. It's more of it's a really valuable education to a mysterious part of the world that fascinates and scares us. Okay, so thank you.
Brad, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Now, if you are interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, please give us a call at the number on your screen, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.